Welcome to the Untamed Ambition. My name is Thomas. My clients are stacking up their target bucks. I see from social media that Don Higgins, Brackett, and Jeff Sturgis all killed their target bucks in the past week. Congratulations to all of those hunters. But there's one thing that they all have in common that you may or may not be able to relate to with their situations, and that's pressure. Specifically, the level of pressure or the lack of pressure that's affecting the property that you're hunting, be it private or public. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't have the same level of success that they have. It just means that you need to approach that from a different angle. It's a different scenario. It's going to require different type of action to reach the same level of success or to accomplish the same goals.
Just try to be more connected with your environment. Try to be more connected with your food.
Welcome back to another episode from the Untamed Ambition. Call it a podcast, call it a vlog, YouTube, whatever it is. I'm kind of just giving up on having some set form and structure right now. I'm just trying to push content out when I have the opportunity. If you are like me and you're trying to juggle all of aspects of life, family, work, all that stuff, on top of this whole rut hunting thing, you know, the anticipation of what might happen, trying to plan, trying to make calculated moves, trying to monitor the weather obsessively, monitoring your cell cameras and trail cameras and everything, just looking for that opportunity, that glimmer of hope, but sacrificing the ability to plan at all because of that. If you're like me and you can relate, then subscribe. Okay, you need to subscribe to this. I got some good stuff coming your way. We learn from our mistakes, okay? That's the best way to learn. I shouldn't say it has to be a mistake. We learn through our experiences. You learn the best through mistakes. And I've made a lot of mistakes. I've had a lot of experiences. I've had a lot of incredible hunting opportunities, and I want to share some of these with you and help you relate to my situation, but also take these things, apply them to your situation, and have more success. That's what I do for a living, okay? Today I want to talk to you about real-world rut hunting situations and how pressure is obviously problematic, right? We know that. But how can you get around that? Pressure can be used as a very valuable tool, but pressure always limits potential. The people I talked about in the beginning of the video, in that intro, they have limited to no pressure on their properties. Pressure always limits potential. Pressure limits potential. Just remember that. Now, there's plenty of forms of pressure outside of just human hunting pressure and human activity. Those are all things that we need to take into consideration, especially when we're designing a property, improving a property, so on. But right now, end of October, pre-ruts, full swing, how are we finding these bucks when the pressure has been increasing steadily up until this point in the season? Real world scenario, real world situation, my story right now. I'm going to bring you up to speed 100% on where I sit with my pursuit of a high pressured, wary, old, smart, and wise, mature buck. Okay. So if you watched my video a few weeks back, I talked about this buck I call Yoda, a buck that I can't hunt. Okay. So basically, this buck has been on my radar for a few years. Doesn't mean I've pursued him. But I picked him up this year with some intel from some of my family that lives on the farm. Some of my younger nephews have been glassing the fields at night, taking notes for me. They've been watching this buck on and off throughout the summer. I moved some cameras. I found him. By the time I caught up to his routine and had a good game plan, the timing or the window of opportunity didn't line up with my life. My wife was gone. I couldn't leave the kids. I couldn't abandon my family to go hunt. Even though I saw a window of opportunity, there wasn't anything I could do about it. So I just sat back and watched my cameras light up with where I should have been. That's besides the point, okay? Things come up. October shift happens. Buck disappears. Yoda, the Y8. I've had a couple names for him, but my target buck disappears. We all see that happen, right? The last video I dropped last week was a video about hunting in the rain. And I talked about how the best time to hunt with those rain fronts, those weather patterns, really depends on your situation. Should you hunt before the rain, during the rain, after the rain? Again, situationally dependent. At that time, I had said that I was going to wait until this front moved through, big wind shift, temp drops, and I was going to hunt on the back end of that front, take advantage of that situation. But the situation changed. I have a cell camera in a specific doe bedding area on the farm. Now, I don't run a lot of cell cameras, and for a reason. I'll talk about that in another video at another time. But I don't run a lot of cell cameras, so I pick and choose my intel appropriately, and I try to focus on very specific situations. I try to be very intentional with my setups, especially when it comes to trail cameras. This particular camera I put out in this bedding area in August. From August through most of October, only does on that camera, as expected, with the intentional setup within a doe bedding area. A couple days ago, the day that I posted that video about hunting in the rain, I had a couple of buck pictures. Okay, that's a change. The day following the video, I had 11 different bucks on that camera from midnight to midnight, a 12-hour period of time, including my target buck Yoda, during daylight, mind you. So that right there told me something's changing. You know, not only is the pre-rut kicking up, but something's going on in that bedding area. A party is about to begin, and I need to get in there. So I changed my plans. I decided to drive back and do a hang and hunt in the rain all day. It was last Thursday, and I had a great day. Stayed dry, other than my hands, but that's what happens when you're messing with camera gear and archery tackle. Otherwise, I stayed dry, pretty comfortable. It was relatively warm. It was in the 60s, and it rained on and off throughout the day. Watched some does in the morning. Later that afternoon, I had a really nice young 3-year-old come in, bed down. It was a fun experience watching him while the rain was pretty heavy. And then right at the last light, I happened to look over my shoulder, and there he was, bedded down. Somehow he got in and bedded down without me noticing him. Out of range, no shot. And when he did get up, I tried to call to him. He acknowledged me, but he basically made a big loop, and I can only assume that he was trying to get downwind to me. So the timing was right at dark. It was getting pretty dark. As soon as he was out of sight, I slipped out of that tree and got out the back door. Hopefully he didn't pick me up. You don't know if he picked up where I was at any point in time. I don't know. I have a sneaking suspicion that he may have been bedding in that general area all day and just repositioned at one point, because I don't think that those bucks were really moving very much on Thursday during the rain. I think they all kind of settled in and then just moved around, short movements, fed a little bit here and there in between the rain. Now, here's the kicker. I probably should have or would have killed that buck had I set up a little bit differently. I've only hunted this spot a couple of times, different situations. I've bounced around a little bit depending on the wind, trying to play it safe. Okay, so first and foremost, as I talk about my situation here and the high pressure element of this, I need to back up and explain some background story on the property that I'm hunting. Okay, it's a relatively large property. That's my advantage. I've got a fair amount of real estate that I have access to. It's a large dairy farm, but it's broken up into a lot of smaller properties. The the combination of the topography and other private land ownership in the area breaks up this property to where every mature buck, and most of the deer in general are living their lives on a daily, weekly, and certainly an annual basis across many properties. Some deer are traveling great distances to different ranges. And I've just learned this over the years by sharing information with the neighbors, trail cameras, and monitoring multiple different pieces of our property that are spread out in the area. So that's my advantage, is I have the real estate, and I've been able to surveil that real estate pretty well over the years. You may or may not know that I worked for a trail camera company for over a decade. So I was in charge of R&D, customer service, testing cameras, prototyping cameras. So I had a lot of surveillance happening on this property. My background's in wildlife biology, so I was kind of applying that research background to having access to resources. So I've learned a lot in this property. The disadvantage that I have is this is a highly active dairy farm. A lot of commotion. Okay, that's one aspect when it comes to the element of pressure. The other issue that I have, and this is a major double-edged sword, I share this property with multiple other hunters. At times, up to 18 other people will hunt this property. And when I say it's a large property, I'm not talking that large, right? It's pretty big, but that's a lot of pressure on the property. On top of that, all of the surrounding landowners hunt. The overwhelming majority of them are Amish. So if you've heard about their style of hunting and just how they approach things, most of it's true. They are much less selective on what they harvest. They hunt differently. Obviously, they're not really using scent control. They're not even allowed to wear camouflage, so on and so forth. Some of them are actually really good hunters, and I've, over the years, become pretty good friends with a handful of them, and that's really improved the area. But there's a lot of pressure in the area. So all these Michigan guys out there that love to brag about how much pressure Michigan has, come on down to my neck of the woods and try to get ahead of a buck in an area like this. Okay, food everywhere, pressure is unbelievable. And this last weekend in particular, just 24 hours after I had eyes on my target buck, 8 other hunters showed up on our property. The double-edged sword there is these are my family members, and I enjoy spending time with them, and I want them to come down and enjoy our farm and have good opportunities as well. But it just so happens that our hunting cabin, the gathering place when everyone's on our farm, is plugged in the middle of the best deer habitat on our farm. So that creates some conflicts, right? I deal with pressure, an insane amount of pressure, and I would say that my understanding of pressure is what has directly led to my success in the field. Being able to monitor the pressure, how that affects deer, adjust appropriately, and also use that pressure as a tool to understand where it's going to move deer, how they're going to move, and predict that movement so I can get one step ahead. Okay, that's a little bit of background. Now, this particular buck that I'm after, again, Yoda, big, mature. I think he's 5.5, might be 6, but I think he's 5.5. Big, wide, main frame 8-pointer, just a massive frame, beautiful deer, old, smart deer. Like I said, that's what I'm in it for. I obviously love killing big bucks, and if I could chase a 200-inch deer every year, I would be ecstatic, but that's not a real world situation. Real world is you work your butt off to get mature deer because you're balancing other activities on these properties, other recreation, farming, stuff like that. Okay. This deer has me fascinated because I'm, in the worst way, want to put a monster 8-pointer on my wall, and he certainly fits that bill. But this bedding area that he was last seen in is not far from our farm and not far from our hunting cabin, and I know without a shadow of a doubt that this weekend all 8 hunters on our property, 8 additional hunters beyond me, all 8 of those hunters passed within 100 yards, possibly less, of this bedding area. But my experience has told me that doesn't necessarily mean that buck's going to vacate the area. I don't know, and I won't know until I get another breadcrumb or another lead, another clue that's going to direct me in the path of travel or direct me to where I need to go, right? To find another clue and then another clue and another clue. Okay. But I know that there's a lot of pressure in this area. So that's why I wanted to talk about this, because every year I deal with this, and every year I still somehow manage to fill my tag or have some really good encounters with these extremely high pressured bucks. They're very intelligent. They just move differently, right? They don't handle the same levels of pressure that does and fawns and young bucks do. So don't let that fool you. That's the number one consideration when it comes to pressure, is to not be fooled by what you see with these other deer, because they are not the age class of deer that you're pursuing, and they're not as smart. They'll tolerate different things. I shouldn't say they're as smart. They're just more tolerant to different stuff, because an old wary doe is arguably as smart or smarter than a mature buck, but they will tolerate different levels of pressure. That comes down to the consistency factor. That's a whole nother conversation, which you can find all that information if you watch one of my previous videos that I talk about. I go into more depth on these 4 key elements that really help you catalog all the variables involved in hunting. It's going to give you a lot of good information. So go back and check that out if that tickles your fancy. But this situation in general, I have to play it safe. Okay. This is how I have found to hunt and have good opportunities and kill bucks in high pressured situations during the rut. And the first thing is you have to play it safe. Right? You have to, absolutely, without a shadow of a doubt, no argument. You can't jam it. You can't block it. You can't ozone it out in the open air to the extent that you're going to trick a mature buck's nose from your scent. So you have to play that wind all the time. Play it safe. And one of the things that I always try to do is hunt my property and scout my property from the outside in. Keep as much pressure off as possible. Even when other people are there putting pressure on, it might not be looking at the property as a whole, but these areas where I think that this buck might spend time, the travel corridors going to and from these bedding areas, and even the food sources that I think he might be hitting, the last thing you want to do is blow them out of the bedding areas or blow them off of food sources. So hunt from the outside in. Don't be afraid to hang an observation stand with a safe wind. And there's a big difference between a safe wind and a big buck killing wind, okay? The big buck killing wind, sometimes you're really threading that needle. On a safe wind, you're getting in there so you can observe general deer movement, potentially see the deer you're after, locate a target buck or the target buck, but you're kind of just trying to monitor general deer movement and see how things are going, and then be prepared to fine-tune that setup so you can thread the needle when that wind changes and you get that big buck killing wind, okay? So always do that. With the scouting side of things, same thing. Again, I don't run a lot of cell cams. I don't even have cell service on a lot of the property, so I can't run cell cams if I wanted to everywhere. So I'm always trying to scout my way into these areas. I don't scout any deeper with boots on the ground than I have to, and I don't just go pull trail camera cards all willy-nilly until I have to. And a lot of times if I get too deep into a property, I'm probably going to hunt the area, change that card, hang a camera, whatever it might be, and then I'm going to leave. So I get firsthand experience, and then I leave the camera or I pull that intel to tell me what's going on. You kind of put the pieces of the puzzle together, and again, you're looking for those breadcrumbs, that next clue. Where were this buck's last known whereabouts on the property? Where do I think he's going next? And just kind of keep trying to follow those. Because at this point, you shouldn't be looking back at where that buck was early in the season. All you can do is look back at where he was last year around this time, and then look at those 4 key elements, right? And what's similar, biggest thing right now, food and pressure. Okay, we know the timing. Timing is the rut time of the year. Timing can be told by the historical information from our trail cameras. That's why I keep a journal first and foremost. And then additionally, I keep these pattern tracker pages. And I don't know how well you can see that. Pattern tracker, I keep track of all the trail camera stuff. Every time I'm changing cards on cameras, I'm keeping track of that, trying to get as much intel as I possibly can. But I'm looking at this historical data, and I'm putting the pieces of the puzzle together as patterns develop right now. You're not going to pattern a pressured buck during the rut, and you're just going to beat yourself up by trying to do so, okay? What you need to do is anticipate these movements and play it safe until you get the intel that you need to make that aggressive move. I'm all about being aggressive, and that's a big factor in hunting these bucks is when you do have the intel and your gut says, I need to be here around this time or under these conditions, then you need to make a move. And you need to commit to that, and you need to do everything you can to not screw it up. I'm speaking from personal experience, because if you go in there half-cocked, you're not going to outwit one of these wary old mature bucks unless it's by luck. You know, you hear about those stories. That absolutely happens. I'd rather be lucky than good. But if you're going in for a serious hunt, okay? Get up early. Get out there early. Get settled in early. Minimize your movement. Make sure that wind is exactly where you want that wind to be. If you're hunting close to these bedding areas, you need to be absolutely certain that your wind's not blowing in the bedding area. You need to be absolutely certain that you have adequate cover in the tree that you're in, because these deer are super sensitive as they approach bedding areas. And more often than not, you're going to get picked out of that tree and probably not even know that buck was in the area. He's going to come in, he's going to stand still. You know, these mature bucks, it's nothing for them to sit still for 20, 30 minutes at a crack and move their ears and their eyes. And they will pick you out of the tree. The old does will pick you out of the tree. They'll ruin the whole hunt for you. So keep that in mind. Play it safe, but when it does come time, you got to put your game face on and make that move, and don't hesitate. If you hesitate too long and variables change, that's ultimately what causes all the pressure to begin with on these properties, is a lot of variables changing all the time. When that happens, you're always playing catch up. So when you get most recent information, you got to act on it. That's the biggest thing. My situation right now, I knew where that buck was last Thursday on a southwest wind by the end of the day. By that next morning, the wind had flipped completely out of the west, eventually out of the northwest. It's going to be almost dead north for the better part of the day tomorrow, and then it's coming back around. It's going to come out of the south again. My gut tells me that that buck never left that bedding area. I think he stayed in there. He's got himself a little honey hole. He's got the does. He's not showing up on that camera every day, but he has no reason to. Once he's found what he's looking for in that area, he's not going to check that scrape every day. The other issue that I ran into there was another scrape had actually opened up on the main trail coming into there, and that's ultimately the scrape that I should have been set up to hunt over, because that's where that buck bedded down. But I set up over the other scrape, and I set up to where my wind was absolutely guaranteed to not blow into that bedding area as it shifted more out of the west in the afternoon. And if I wouldn't have done that, that 3-year-old would have almost certainly busted me. And who knows, again, if that buck was bedded in the area, the mature buck, if I would have blown him out of there. So again, I played it safe, hoping to live and see another day, and had a great experience. So that's a victory in my book. Getting eyes on your target buck is one thing. Having him inside of 60 yards for the better part of an hour, who knows, maybe most of the day, but I knew he was there for over an hour. That's a victory for sure. Now, obviously, need to put the nail in the coffin, or the arrow in the rib cage. That's where I'm sitting. But again, big changes have happened. So playing it safe, hunting from the outside in, monitoring those areas. Right now, specifically, you need to be looking at the does. Scrapes are a great indicator that those bucks are in the area, but I don't necessarily key in on them entirely. Look for the doe bedding areas and then look for the scrapes near the doe bedding areas. That should be your primary focus. Where are the does feeding? Where are they bedding? And then when you get in there, dial in on where the scrapes are, because those bucks are generally circling the downwind side, working those scrapes, looking for those does, or they're in there with the doe already. So that's something to think about. That's how I find bucks in the high-pressured hunting situations that I deal with. It's, to be honest with you, it's fun. It's extremely frustrating, but it's fun. It adds a whole nother level of challenge to this game. Keeps me on my toes, makes me a better hunter. It helps me do my job better when I look at these scenarios in my situation and understand, like, oh, the changing of cover in these areas, how it affects those deer, the changes that I make, how those affect those deer, and then having all this element of pressure come in and move those deer. It really helps teach me how to manipulate the habitat, but you can't always do that, right? So sometimes you got to think now, but while you're thinking now, another good tip here would be to think ahead and how we can reduce the pressure on those deer in general to hold them in those areas, which gives us more opportunities to hunt them in those areas, right? So keep that in consideration. But for right now, play it safe, hunt from the outside in, mind your pressure, okay? The biggest thing is looking for those clues, those breadcrumbs, that next lead. That's either going to lead you to another clue or lead you to that deer specifically, okay? So that's what you're looking at. Stay on that, and don't let those deer know that you're hunting them. That's the name of the game. You don't want to be the source of pressure that throws them off. You want to monitor everything else that's going on. So keep that in mind. Play it safe for right now until you get the intel, then get aggressive and act now and act serious. Until then, please smash that subscribe button, like this video, throw a comment in there, tell me how your season's going. I appreciate all the comments from the previous video. I love reading those things from you guys, hearing your stories. Thanks for watching. Hunt smart, hunt safe, and remember, wind is king. Always, 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 wind is king. Thank you.